Welcome to Withdraw Consent. Today I want to do an episode about all the things, all the strange things related to the Iran-Israel conflict, excluding the one I did in the previous episode, which I guess I'll link below. And in that one, I talked about how they had not begun enrichment to grade 3, so that the entire thing is a farce. And Trump is in on it, and Bibi Netanyahu's in it. If you haven't seen it, you can check that out. But I want to talk about just point by point here. I got these bullet points here, okay? First one is that the United States has a history of just being completely untrustworthy. Like you look at Libya, give us your nukes, and then terrible things happen to Gaddafi, obviously. And so I'm putting a reference below. So this will be the first reference. It'll be to a Glenn Greenwald episode. And basically, he covers all of the details and tweets and stuff surrounding. I don't have the time for that. He did a great job if you're interested in it. But he proves that basically, before the attack, Trump had a call with Netanyahu. He then gets off the call and he says, he truths out that he has urged Netanyahu not to attack because they're doing negotiations with Iran to get rid of their nuclear material. And so then a couple days later, he tells everybody to evacuate the region and Israel does a surprise attack, right? After that, you could watch the Glenn Greenwald video, but they've got Israelis and they've got a Trump tweet and it was taken down, I believe. And basically, Trump lied. This is what Glenn Greenwald proves in his video. Trump lied. They talked about the plan to attack Iran. Trump approved it and then came out and lied in order to lull the Iranians into, so that they could be murdered in their homes without moving to new locations, and their families and neighbors, like whatever. And it's just Israeli stuff here. And like you could say, well, you can't trust the establishment United States, but you could trust Trump. He's proven that that's completely false. And I'm not saying he's full establishment, and I'm not saying Kamala Harris would have been better. I'm not saying either of those things. I'm just saying that he's as dirty as the establishment when it comes to lying to foreign countries and losing all credibility for the United States. That part of it's disgusting and disappointing, because there is a way you could do this. If you wanted to even just be a warmonger neocon, there's a way you could do this whole thing without the United States losing its credibility. You could set red lines. You could follow through with those red lines. You might not catch them in their bed as well, but there would be some honor in that. Okay, another point I want to talk about is I did a previous episode that nobody covered at the time, and I think it was the October missile attacks that Iran had done. And I showed how they lied and said that the attacks didn't come through, and then I played you multiple videos of the attacks coming through and penetrating the Iron Dome. Even one missile, which I showed you, hitting the Mossad HQ, like precisely in the middle of Tel Aviv, And so, I believe Tel Aviv. So what they were doing there in that situation is they were upplaying the strength of the Iron Dome, and they were downplaying the strength of the ballistic missiles. Now we see an entirely different situation here, and they've changed their strategy completely, and now they're admitting the weakness of the Iron Dome and admitting the strength of the Iranian ballistic missiles. You could take from that what you will. In my opinion, in October, they didn't want the United States to get into war. That wasn't where they were going with that particular, with those particular round of attacks, and now they do, is what it indicates to me. This is just my opinion. It indicates that this is, the poor civilians, 24, but their buildings are getting destroyed and stuff. And so that indicates to me that they're trying to get the United States into war. Another point directly related to that is that with the failure of the Iron Dome to stop the ballistic missiles, now don't get me wrong, the Iron Dome and the United States destroyers and the United States aircraft and the Israeli aircraft are great at shooting down the slower drones. They're just terrible at shooting down the hypersonic missiles, which is a small percentage of the missiles that are shot in any round of missiles that Iran shoots at Israel, right? But the hypersonic missiles are extremely effective and get through the Iron Dome on a regular basis when fired. And a point here that I could make is that Iran could have caused this massive destruction that they're doing in Israel at any time they wanted previous to this, because they have the capability, but that they haven't at all indicates that it's not their intention to. Now, it could be their intention to at some future point if Israel did not do this, but that's hypothetical, and you can make that conjecture if you'd like. But just my point is, since they haven't done it unless provoked, only time they do it is when they're provoked, that seems to signal that their intention is that they don't want to. Okay, let's go to another point, which is that why is Iran attacking civilian stuff? Okay, so you know how Israel's the most moral army in the world, and the Iraqis put Scud missiles in their mosques, and how Hamas has tunnels under the hospital. Okay, so basically underneath the city of Tel Aviv, there's a the big bunker, which is their NORAD. It's called the Fortress of Zion, and it's right underneath Tel Aviv. So when Tel Aviv gets attacked with missiles, there's a base under there. There's actually I'm going to put a reference below, but Israel has a hospital, and just directly underneath the footprint of that hospital is the footprint of a military base. So if you were to strike that military base and the bombs hit the hospital, you could say, well, they're targeting civilian infrastructure, hospitals. That's a war crime, But you put your base underneath, and then you're the one who claims that they do this, and you're the one who actually do this. Okay, let's go to some other points. Okay, here's an interesting one. There's a difference between a preventative strike and a preemptive strike. So a preemptive strike is you're about to strike me, therefore I'm going to strike you. And it can be morally and international law legally justified, a preemptive strike. But preventative strikes cannot be justified under international law. They're illegal. And so, for example, if we want to look at some historical references, when Germany attacked Russia in World War II, Russia was about to attack Germany. So that was a preemptive strike. Now, if we go to something like the 1967 Six-Day War, like you'll have somebody who's Ben Shapiro, and he'll lie to you completely and say that that the surrounding countries started the attack. And that's just a complete lie. What the argument he should be making is that it was a preemptive strike because they had moved divisions to the border and there was increased tensions, and then they were in existential fear of their country. So they did a preemptive strike and try to morally justify that and legally international law. But that's totally different than a preventative strike. So this, what they did here is a preventative, not preemptive strike, which I think is an important point to notice. You could argue that the Six-Day War was preventative and not preemptive if you want to, but what I'm saying is the Israelis, like Ben Shapiro, could make the argument that it's preemptive and might win people over on that. But you can't ever win people over on a preventative strike, So, okay, the situation with the United States moving the Nimitz from the Pacific over to the region is a terrible thing. This is the first time in the history of the world modern history that China has had more sea power in the Pacific over there than we have, which leaves Taiwan in jeopardy, and it's all for Israel. Like if you wanted to maintain balance in the Pacific, you keep the Nimitz over there to deter China from Taiwan. Even though I'm not a fan of foreign intervention at all, I'll say in that regard, but I'm saying it further destabilizes the world on behalf of Israel. And if the United States attacks, so the attack that Israel did on Iran is completely illegal, immoral, and evil. I'm not taking Iran's side. I'm just saying that's a fact. And if the United States participates in that fact, in that attack, then they'll be doing the exact same thing. So I covered in the last episode, Bibi said they're 12 to 13 months away from making the bomb. I had an article in that episode saying they're 3 years from starting to make the bomb, and they have not started yet. Some stuff about Trump in this. Trump's just been disgraceful, absolutely just disgusting. And don't get me wrong, he'd be better than Harris on immigration. Don't get me wrong. But people voted for him to be non-interventionist, and I was against the Soleimani thing. Don't assassinate people. It's like, is that hard? Don't assassinate people on peace missions. Oh, another thing about the Grand Greenwald that I didn't mention is that, since we're getting into Trump here, is that one of the targets that Israel did was he was the negotiator for the deal with Iran and the nuclear stuff. So the negotiator came out with a statement before and leading up to the next peace talk, which was 3 days after Israel did the illegal attack, and came out and said, hey, I think we're really close to a deal. right? So then they assassinate the negotiator, which recall, remember Israel illegally assassinated the negotiator between Hamas and Israel in Tehran. Remember they had the IRGC guy plant the bomb in his room, and so then they asked Trump afterwards about how it's going with the future of the situation. He's like, I don't know. Everybody I was negotiating with is dead. I just don't know how you sleep at night. Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? The guy you're negotiating with, you're going to kill him. It's totally an Israeli thing to do. You know, that's totally a Jewish thing. And, okay, so Trump's tweets. Okay, so Trump had an interview. It was just a quick thing. And they told him, so, you know, Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, has said that they're not working on a program. They haven't restarted it since 2003, you know? And a reporter asked Trump about that because Trump said, we can't allow Iran to get a bomb. Okay. And then they said, hey, but your DNI director said they haven't started working towards a bomb yet. His response was, well, they can't get a bomb. Oh my gosh, what a sellout. So disgusting. And then Tucker Carlson calls him out. He was on Steve Bannon, and you've probably seen the clip. And he's talking about how Bush's legacy was destroyed by Iraq, and he was going to do all these good things with Social Security, but now he's just a complete failure. Like, definitely one of the worst presidents of my lifetime. And the problem with this is that this will destroy Trump's legacy if he goes forward with it, and if it becomes a disaster. Okay, but people won't remember the good things he did in his first term. They won't remember good things that he may or may not do in his second term. They'll just remember this because everybody remembers Bush as Iraq, you know, mission accomplished, the terribleness, ISIS, just all the terrible things that come from it. So then he attacks Tucker Carlson, who was the keynote speaker at the RNC, calling him Kooky Carlson. And I don't know. Trump tweeted and said that Iran needs to unconditionally surrender. I just can't wrap my head around this. It's insane because, number one, we're not at war with Iran. We're allied with the aggressor who's illegally doing war. And I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like France issuing a public statement, Macron saying Russia needs to unconditionally surrender. It's like, wait, you're not in this war, you know? Like, you're not in this war. And unlike that situation, so in that situation, Russia is the aggressor. So, you know, well, I guess, yeah. No, that wouldn't work. So it would be like China saying that Ukraine should surrender, but China, you're not in that war. And Russia is the aggressor. In this one, Israel's the aggressor. So that's ridiculous. And of course they're not going to surrender, of course. You know, they came out and said they're not going to. But this is just more ridiculous. Now, there was an interesting story. I got a reference below, and it was about 2 Chinese cargo planes that were headed to Iran, and their transponders went off as they hit the Iranian border. And so clearly the inference to that is that they're bringing military supplies. I saw a report that China had agreed to send enough rocket fuel to launch 800 rockets because it uses a specialized type of fuel. The hypersonic missiles do, and China also has the hypersonic missiles, as well as Russia, and not us or Israel. So, but like the precipice that we're standing on is in order for Iran to get a nuclear bomb, like say they're too far from the breakout period to actually get one imminently. So if what they would need is they would need 90% uranium, and they would need a little bit bigger than a softball size of it, right? And they would also need a delivery device. I'm sorry, it's just we're just messing with terribleness here, and it's going to be terrible for Israel and our troops, and if that were to be a thing. But it's concerning that China's supplying them. I don't believe Russia supplied them yet, but Iran has a partnership since January of 2025, I believe, with Russia, Iran and Russia, and Iran sent drones to Russia. So Russia has the opportunity to send them stuff if they want to, but Putin's looking like more that he wants to get into a peace footing because he's talking to Erdogan in Turkey. And also, I forgot, this is one of the best ones, right? So basically what happens is Iran, their biggest facility is located 70, 80 meters under ground. I'll put the name, I can't do it. It starts with F. But I'll put the name of it on the screen. And the problem is it's so deep underground that the Israeli bombs can't penetrate it, right? But The United States bombs could. This is the facility that they need to destroy if they want to just completely wreck the nuclear program in Iran. And so basically they entered into a war because Iran had not begun enriching their uranium to grade 3, 90%. They had not begun, and if they did begin, it would be 1 to 3 years. So they have to stop them from because they're not doing anything, but they got to stop them. But they don't even have the capability to stop them. They need the U.S. to stop them, right? They don't even have the capability to get down to this base because they need us to come with the big high altitude ones and just level the place and then drop bombs where bombs are dropped and drop bombs and drop bombs and drop bombs, because their payloads aren't as big on our U.S. F-35s, that they're flying, but they need the big guys to come. So it's interesting that they started a war that they didn't even have the potential to complete the objectives without drawing the U.S. in, which is a higher indicator that they're going to draw the U.S. in and that this is already pre-planned. So in that regard, I'm going to leave you with this meme. I really like this. Who wants to be a millionaire? It's Benjamin Netanyahu. The question is, to drag the U.S. into war with Iran, you will A, attack a U.S. ship, B, attack a U.S. base, C, assassinate U.S. official, D, conduct terrorism on U.S. soil. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu's playbook. It's all dirty. It's just terrible. That we're allies with these people is insane. It's this. I mean, I don't know how they could get, not me, but just a regular person. I don't know, even a Zionist. How could they get them to persuade them into this war? It's got to be something, and it's kind of something soon. I saw Alex Jones tweet, and Alex Jones, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on him, but his tweet was here's the what's going on with World War III right now. And he listed some bullet points. And one of them was Iran already has nukes. And another one was that the U.S. is going to attack by Thursday. That's from his sources. I have no comment on that. I don't have any sources. I'm not that kind of guy. But today's Wednesday the 18th. So I'm going to get these 2 videos out before they're completely out of date because we're in a full-fledged war, which is highly illegal. And as I watched, what's his name? The third-party guy, the old Jewish guy. Put his name on the screen. I watched a video where he was making the appeal that we shouldn't go to war. And he was saying anything done if we go to war will be highly illegal because Congress must consent, And I believe Trump will do it without consent is what I believe he will do. Now, if he did do that, it should be catastrophic in the midterms for him. But because the Democrats are just doing everything wrong right now, I don't know how catastrophic it'll be, but it could lead to his impeachment. And, literally he could end up in prison for this. I mean, like if the ICC put warrants out, I don't know if they would be brave enough to do because we have the Hague Invasion Act where we're going to invade if people do legitimate war crimes in the United States and they get arrested and sent to the ICC. So anyways, but I'm just saying this is a terrible situation and incredibly disappointing. I didn't have a ton of faith in Trump, but I was hoping he would do some things right, like not get into major wars, mass deportations, you know what I mean? But still better than Harris. Though if he gets us into World War III, like if this escalates and escalates and escalates into World War III, then he will be worse than Harris. It will have been worse than Harris. And I'm listening to these videos sometimes, but just G-rated stuff, news stuff, and I have my 8-year-old sitting next to me, and he says, "Dad, why don't they just stop doing this?" And I just tell him they can't. They can't stop. We've seen this happen multiple times in human history, and everybody escalates. Nobody will stop. You could de-escalate. Like if you had a non-controlled power in the United States. So say if I was in charge. All of a sudden, just today, I was in charge. Cool. Send special forces into Israel, get Netanyahu, dump him at the ICC, apologize to Iran. That was just a completely controlled establishment administration. It turns out, unfortunately, nobody wanted this. You know what I mean? Let's get a repair plan going on. We'll get some investment going. Let's pull some sanctions off. They've had sanctions for how many years? Anyways, and then do a democratic election in Israel. Hopefully they elect somebody who's, I just don't even want to go into that because there's a lot of terrible people there, we'll say. And so anyways, that's what I got for you. A lot of interesting things. If you know more interesting things that I missed, I tried to cover as many as I could. Put them in the description below because I'm interested in learning it for no other reason. Anyways, that's what I got for you. Hope to see you next time.